call this Ethics on Election meeting together. Today is Wednesday, January 8th. It's about 23 minutes after 10. And we'll start with some introductions. I'm the chair. I'm Pete Peterson.
And Pete, let me please introduce Liz Edwards. Liz Edwards started on Monday. She is our new election coordinator 2. Amy, of course, is our election coordinator 1. We are thrilled to have Liz on board, and I thank you all so much for funding this position. I will just take a minute to say, when we were chatting with Liz the other day, we have one full-time employee running elections. You know, I just do it part-time when I'm doing my other job. We have an election every single year. We had 65,000 people vote, and we mailed over 220,000 ballots last year, and we have one person, Amy, that's doing elections. And so we are long overdue to getting a second person, and I just really want to thank you very much for that. And my husband thanks you too.
And that was Barbara Jones speaking for the record.
Thank you, Pete.
And let's continue with our introduction.
Amy Solberg.
Crystal Kennedy.
Forrest Dunbar.
And 2 interpreters. Lisa and Alana.
Okay. And so I think Dean is going to sort of pick up where we left off after our last meeting. Did we figure out, are we on page 11 or page 9 or where are we?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I think we can start where you like. Should we start at page 11?
Yes.
Page 11, okay.
Actually, I think I have one somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Well, I guess I think we're on page 11.
Okay.
And just to open up the preface, we worked on drafting and revising our election code for about a year with the drafting work group that was Ms. Jones and myself and Ms. Spirituality and our contractor Dennis Wheeler and Amy Solberg. And we met periodically, regularly, monthly, sometimes weekly. And we went through the whole Title 28, and this is our product that I'm going to go through next. Do you have anything to add?
Mm-hmm.
So jumping in time, Barbara,
Okay.
and helping me along here as I explain what the changes are. Then generally the changes are just to update the code to not to avoid by mail process and practices, because we did make modifications, but not complete modification, and the general idea was to phase out references to polling locations and precinct-based election, and they get vote by mail. And in a lot of places, we kept polling location just in case for some future time. So, anyways, here at page 11, we already went through the first 10 pages, and we're here at 28, 50, 170, and I guess I would want to go back a few pages to talk about the self-exception that relates to this 50 on page 5. Excuse me, page 4. But we talked about the selfie-exception last time a little bit, and it hasn't been drafted in here. As I mentioned, the state hasn't passed their bill to allow it, so we're out of there now. And selfie-exceptions, it's ensconced here, 28, 50, 50A to line 14. A person may not physically display a photo, video, or other image from marked ballot to another person, also in the polling location or center, within 200 feet of any entrance thereto. So it simply displaying physically in person to someone within the prohibited area, but otherwise you could take a photo and send it to social media and cyberspace, which isn't within 200 feet, to people that aren't within 200 feet. So that's part one, that's the
Right,
exception.
and so what would be allowed is if they're in the voting booth, or whatever you want to call it, they can take a picture on their cell phone and then distribute that, but they can't walk out and go over to where they're going to drop it in the box and then stand there and take a picture of it in front of everyone. That would not be allowed. Is that correct?
I think it's more they can't have a picture on their phone and like show it to people in line
Actually,
or the election officials. I think
Okay.
that's more.
All right.
You can't electioneer, but
yes.
yeah.
Okay.
And then the other part here is excuse me. In part C, C2, this is about the drop boxes. It's pretty much reflects the same as polling location, 200-foot prohibition. We have a drop box prohibition for persuasion within 50 feet of a drop box. So it's pretty much the same, just a different measurement in distance.
So some person from a campaign couldn't stand with a sign right by the drop box to try to influence people how to vote, although most of the time when they're pulling up to a drop box, they've already filled the ballot out. But
Yep.
We were mostly concerned about parked cars in the parking lots where there's a drop box.
Signs or
with a
something
sign,
on this.
right.
Yeah.
So 50 feet is, we think is reasonable.
You have to make sure that John parks his, make sure that our parking lot isn't 50 feet within that drop box. Because John has his sign on the side of his
All
car.
the time, yeah.
He's not up for re-election, but yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
He's magnetic. Could he just peel it off?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Actually, they got stolen recently, so I don't think he even has them right now.
Oh, no.
But that is, that is a good question, because obviously there are times when candidates, like especially I'm thinking of Eagle River where our drop box is, it's right next to our library and it's right next to our Chamber of Commerce office, and it's all kind of together there, which is a very public access kind of a place. So 50 feet is not really very far. I mean, where the drop box is, it's probably 20 feet off the edge of the sidewalk. So typically, I think probably technically you could actually park probably in the very first parking spot, which is a handicapped one, and still be outside of that 50 feet. So I don't know that you're really making any kind of a statement,
We're trying to make a very mild statement.
which is fair. Yeah.
What we don't want to have happen, I think Dick had a truck didn't he have sideboards on his truck that said vote for Trainee or something like that?
He did.
We don't want someone to park a truck or a vehicle like that in the parking lot of the Spenard Rec Center where there's a drop box.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to avoid. That's campaigning or electioneering that's unfair.
But it might be that the solution, or whatever we call it, the remedy is just being like, hey, you can park on the other side of the parking lot.
Yep.
I remember I was actually involved in a campaign at DC, helping this one of my friends run for city council, and we were like yelling with signs to the polling location, and they came out and said, you need to move like 100 feet that way. So we did.
So,
Amy,
the AVCs, we have an AVC Accessible Vote Center at Eagle River and at City Hall, and at the election center, and there's drop boxes at all three of those locations, and so that's an extra 200 feet as well.
And the election center is a real tough one. We have workers who have federal stickers on their cars and stuff, and we've asked them not to park in the parking lot outside the election center and to park around the back,
Back up so you can't
Yeah.
see the.
Right, or, people here at City Hall have gone out and covered up stickers, so,
There you go.
all right.
It's
okay.
interesting about the accessible vote centers, they're covered by the 200-foot prohibition.
Yes.
And then with the drop box nearby them also, you might have two bubbles of 250 feet. Accessible vote, the election centers characterized as an accessible vote
Yeah.
center as well.
Mhm.
And that was the first part about the selfie exception, because it's about persuasion or the polls, there's another part where we can start on page 11. 2850, 170 was you can't exhibit your ballot.
So one of the things that I do want to point out in A, we made that change there. So it says, during the hours, the polling locations or accessible vote centers are open for voting. Because remember, the accessible vote center opens, next week, or the election center opens next week. And so we've had candidates in there that are touring the election center. They want pictures of themselves. They have their campaigns in there. So, we're careful not to be in those photos. We recognize we're neutral and impartial. We don't get in those photos. But they're entitled to be there. They're filing for office. They're finding out what we're doing. They have observers. So it's only during voting. So it's just from March 6th when we start, or 7th when we'll start special circumstance voting until Election Day. That's the only time that it's prohibited.
Pete, I have a question on that then. So Barbara, if you're talking about during the voting time, you're talking about the voting period, or are you talking
Correct.
about 9 in the morning to 5 o'clock when it? Yeah, because again, going back a little bit to being problematic in Eagle River,
Yeah.
because our central meeting location is there. We have all of our community council meetings there. Parks and Rec meets there. Like I said, the Chamber of Commerce office is there, and so candidates or
Yeah.
anybody with a sticker for a candidate on their car could be in that location, in that parking lot at any given time, especially in the evening.
So, Crystal, I would argue that there's two provisions for voting. So the first one is voting begins at the drop boxes in this year on March 17th. Okay, so the drop boxes are open 24/7. So
Okay.
you cannot campaign in front of that drop box 50 feet from the 17th of March until the 7th of April. Now, there's nobody that's standing out there monitoring that at night. So it's a violation and it could be enforced, but we have to have some proof of that. We're not monitoring it, actively monitoring it.
But a citizen, somebody in the community.
Could certainly
Would-
lodge a
right,
complaint,
yes.
and we could certainly talk to somebody about it, but we're not gonna prosecute somebody if we don't have it'd be really difficult. In a circumstance, if somebody comes at night and it's inadvertent and it's a bumper sticker, for example. Now, the Accessible Vote Center at Eagle River opens 1 week before the election, so that would be like March
30th.
30th? March 30th until April 7th. That is during voting, and that is only from, are they open? I don't remember their hours exactly, is it
I think for Eagle River, through the chair, I think Eagle River is 8 to 5.
8 to 5? So it's 200 feet then for that 1 week and 1 day. Okay, 200 feet from 8 to 5, because that's the only time they're voting. Except Election Day, of course, it's from 7 to 8. So at that time, it's different. And then we do have people, they have a 200-foot string, and they do enforce it. Someone comes in and says there's a truck out there that says Dick Cheney for assembly. We're going to go measure, and we're going to cover it up. Or that's usually what we do, is just cover it up. We just put paper and tape over it and cover it up. We don't call anybody, we don't prosecute or anything like that. And it has to be complaint driven if we were not monitoring the parking lots. Okay?
Okay, yeah.
I would add that one part of this, one element of persuading people is the language that A1 attempted to persuade. There's got to be some sort of actual attempt. I think there's a mental state element. So if they're just inadvertently too close and told to move, they move. I think that they weren't really attempting. So, but I think they're resistant and belligerent and stubborn. Or obviously, these things can't be disclosed because it's persuasive. That crosses that line. They're attempting to persuade.
Well, I think most of them are obvious, and that's why people put stuff on their cars, and that is in an attempt to make that name recognition that will cause somebody to be influenced to vote for him or her or whatever. But anyway, yeah, I'm still just trying to figure out exactly how meaningful any of this really is. I mean, I know you have to have some kind of a guideline, but at the same time, you know, how much of it is problematic, just in terms of people going about their everyday business versus somebody who is trying to be openly and overtly trying to persuade somebody. So
Well,
the big,
we'll give
you know,
you
the
two
big
examples.
sign, you know, on
Exactly.
the back of a pickup truck.
We have
So-
two of those examples, not in a pickup truck. Catty corner from here, over in that empty lot, somebody had a big old sign, and it's within 200 feet of the polling location, because this is a polling location. So the workers went over and tipped it over. Then we had another sign back here on the fence. It was on the fence that's going, not this fence, because I don't think there is a fence here, so it would have been the fence around the coffee shop.
Right.
But it's still within 200 feet of the polling location, and the election workers took it down. So those are blatant violations. They know they're within 200 feet. They absolutely are trying to influence voters that are coming to City Hall to vote, and we took them down.
Okay, and do you mind if I go on with this? I guess what I'm trying to make sure is, and this has been a headache for people that have been complained against before, especially in school parking lots, and that is somebody has, you know, their bumper sticker in the back of their window, and they show up to go vote. So they pull into the parking lot to walk in to vote, and then at some point, and sometimes these particular people don't really hear the complaint, but you might, or the school might, you know, somebody will say, hey, there's somebody in the parking lot right now with a so-and-so sticker on their windshield, whatever.
Well, the good news is,
Okay.
we've gone to vote by mail, and that doesn't happen as much anymore.
Well, that's true, but what you're talking about, though, is the fact that these kinds of signs on somebody's car, bumper sticker or whatever, still has to be outside of the 200 feet. And you know, and so I know I'm being nitpicky about it, but I guess I'm just, you know, thinking about how this actually plays out
Yeah.
in anybody's community.
So the good news is that it's not 122 polling locations, over
True.
80 of which were schools. And I agree with you, schools are like community centers. So I think that is one of the good news parts of this. The schools are very happy that we're gone.
I'm sure they are. Yes.
So we have drop boxes at Begich,
Yeah.
Most of the high schools,
West,
West,
Service.
South, Diamond, the ASD Education Center, Bartlett.
Do we have a drop box at Bartlett?
We have one
Okay.
at Bartlett, and we have one at Clark.
But the good news is all of those schools have multiple parking lots. The drop boxes are all on the periphery because that's the easiest for people to pull in, shoot the loop, and vote. So, I mean, I can think of Service, there's like, you know, probably 5 or 6 parking lots, and we're in just one. And it's only 50 feet from that drop box. And again, there's so many other drop boxes, and no one is there enforcing that. You know, it would be complaint driven. And then again, we'd be looking for intent, like Dean is talking about. That is going to be very unlikely that those are going to be problems. But let's talk about the election center. That is entirely different. It is a drop box. We have lots of election activity going on around there. people are filing for office, that would be something we would enforce that. We're there. If someone pulls up with a bumper sticker and they're there to do business and we get a complaint, we're gonna take the string out, we're gonna measure, and after we measure, if it's within the 50 feet, we're just gonna take paper out and cover it. And that's it. It's gonna be easy for them to take it off as soon as they leave, but it's very simple. We're not gonna confront anybody. There's no reason to do that. If then we have a different situation, let's say we're here at City Hall, and again, we have those big signs. They're within 200
Right.
feet, we're gonna tip them over. That, we're pretty clear on intent. We did have a discussion with the election person who placed those, and I will tell you that the office got a bouquet of flowers with a ball of string in the bottom of it. So the guy who placed those was letting us know, we'd had a discussion with him and we told him he couldn't do it. And we came to an agreement. He understood why he couldn't do it, and then he sent us flowers. I'm sure it was him. He never signed a card, but
There was a hint.
yeah, he did ask me, and I said something to him, and he said, "Oh, I'm glad you noticed." So we have had those situations, and we've resolved them. We're neutral and impartial. We want to make sure that everybody that gets to come to vote isn't feeling influenced or persuaded to vote one way or another, and isn't offended by those signs. I think that the signs that this guy placed were over the line. I think a bumper sticker, we're back. I'm going to say, sure, that's my way or some individual's way of showing support for someone, but I'm not sure that it shows that attempt to persuade another person to vote for it against a candidate. We are not going to go after somebody, and I don't think the prosecutor would either if they have a bumper sticker within 50 feet of. And I think we have to have it there. We want to be respectful of everybody, but I think the prosecution or investigation of that is going to be pretty limited.
Sounds reasonable. I just know that there are really picky people out there. I mean, I guess I'm one of them, and I can just see how some of these things are going to be, you're going to be ammunition for somebody to go against somebody else. But anyway.
This has been in the code for a long time. These are, the 200 feet is
Oh, yeah, I know.
long time.
Yeah.
The 50 feet has been in there since probably 17, maybe 16.
I think so, right?
Yeah.
Yes, since we went to vote by mail. All right, let's continue.
So, let's see, it's getting to page 11.
The other part of the selfie exception, right there, yeah.
Then that's section 285170's exhibiting or marked island. And subsection B is new, and it tracks the state bill that was proposing selfie exception. It's sort of very similar. So prohibition in A doesn't apply to a voter who gets special assistance in A1. So limits the helping the exhibiting their ballot person assisting and choose that selfie exception. And so both are allowing well, other than the 250-foot exception, they can show a photo otherwise. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, I guess should we continue through the rest of the ordinance? The next section's simply moving, well, it's mostly just clarifying language. A lot of this will just be clarifying language so it's clearer and easier to understand, and others, I guess, more sequenced or chronological sort of structure. So, page 12. We have taken out some portions in the election closure procedures, and Amy was very helpful with that to make sure that these changes complied with what she does every election cycle. And part of that is removing tally sheets. We all don't use those anymore. And the structure follows what I mentioned. We're dividing large sections into a section that applies to polling locations like A1 here and A2 accessible vote centers and A3 drop boxes on page 13. And so again, we're just deleting some sections on page 13 that aren't needed anymore since we don't have synced in polling location.
We don't have memory cards, we don't have tally tapes, we're just getting rid of that.
So we'll see some balance at the designated return locations, the next section, that's the election center. And I think this is just clarifying language, and you'll see this change a lot, removing the precinct, so at the bottom, in A1, we'll replace the word precinct with polling locations for consistency throughout.
And precinct is, remember, that's the geographic area that's designated by the state, but the polling location is the physical location where we vote. So it's just a correction. It wasn't correct to say precinct, so.
Other question. Is the polling location the considered like the front door of that building, or is it the spot within that facility where the polling actually takes place?
Well, it depends.
Oh, okay.
So the polling location is, well, like it's 155, but the code says when you're measuring the 200 feet, you do it from the front door.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Next.
Sure. So next we have on page 14, the appointment of privileges of observers. Do you want to describe what we're doing now?
Well, I'd like to
Yes.
mention number C, that we've clarified that we have security guards only on duty on election day and the day before. There's a lot going on down there at Election Center before that, but, we really can't afford security guards for 3 weeks. We have pretty good security measures, as I think you know, but we're just making clear that the security guards are there the day before and Election Day. Okay? They had to work last year. And then in the next section on the observers that Dean asked about, we used to have poll watchers, but we changed the poll watchers manual several years ago. Poll watchers and observers are the same thing. They can watch at an accessible vote center, or they can watch at the election center. They can watch us doing signature verification, they can watch us scanning envelopes, they can watch us opening envelopes or tabulating. It's all the same thing, and they get the same privileges whether they're at the election center or whether they're at one of the accessible vote centers. So we've just changed that to make sure that the observers is one word, and we've just sort of clarified what their duties are. And that is really page 14, 15. Yeah, and on 15 you can see that they're required to wear identifying badges, they're required to sign in and out. These are right out of their manual. And then we have some other, we have some other provisions on page 16. We can't tell them they can't have a pen or a pencil, but we don't want them to have phones that are interrupting our work, so we've got designated areas for phones, we've got designated areas for their backpacks. They can ask brief questions of election officials, but they're not supposed to interrupt their duties. And then they can always ask the clerk for help, and then we've added this provision that the clerk can request the assistance of law enforcement on page 17. And that was a suggestion of Becky Wynn Pearson. She said that she thought it would be important that I be able to do that.
Yeah, and we also make sure we have that authority to designate these areas. So there's can have these rules applied. Not using cell phones and so forth. My concern was with the cell phone to snap photos. They could call us to their campaign.
Yeah,
But if they move to another area that's open to the public where they're allowed to do that stuff, it's fine. It's something easy. I guess I would note on page 17, I left this language in E. I just shouldn't read it as note for myself to
So that would be
just a note
removed.
in the middle of 17.
Yeah.
we of course have those rules, but it's not codified.
Yeah. We have next section 3, and this is structured so each ordinance section amends a whole chapter. In section 3 is chapter 2860, and we changed the name a little bit. There's no early and absentee voting anymore, so that is the section you see that change, right?
Because it's all early and absentee voting.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's the change we'll see mostly throughout this whole chapter. And big chunks be removed because we no longer have early and absentee, it's all vote by mail. So a lot of this is deletions like you see in page 18 and 19. It's all capitalized for deletion. And this even don't have much time left, so I'll just try to go through quickly and jump in, of course. So we have voting locations and poll-based elections. And so we vote by mail locations are accessible vote centers. This is poll-based. We also make sure it's the Eagle River Town Center, the place in which we actually move center. Let's see. In page 20, we have these locations for alternative voting locations for election day and only Sac Library and I had section D, or additional early alternative voting locations designated by the clerk, so it gives you that flexibility each election cycle.
I'm gonna probably
But
talk.
the whole section's applicable to vote by mail, that's just for the poll-based elections.
Yeah. Okay.
Special needs voting, we changed some new procedures about who can help and how they're identified and what sort of, I guess, statement they need to make.
It just clarifies the process, it simplifies it. You can see this section was, a whole 4 pages long on special needs voting, and you can see we're taking out a whole page because it's too detailed. It's a pretty simple process, and so we're just kind of cleaning it up and simplifying it.
I think in application and practice, you won't see much difference.
No difference.
No difference at all.
Yeah.
And we do see people mention this is confusing and so forth, so I think we've clarified a lot, so it's easy to read. So let's see. Mr. Chair, should we continue? We'll have another county meeting at 11.
11.
Which you and I are chairing.
I know.
So-
Upstairs.
So we've got, about a little over halfway through this.
Yeah, we still have old business we need to get to, but. Oh well.
Old business, you probably need to mention the charter change, Mr. Chair, I think. Did you want to mention that?
You mean just that we're not planning to
Yeah.
set forward? Yeah, so we had talked about doing some charter changes. That was, I'm trying to remember what those topics were exactly. It had to do with the dates and times of the elections.
For vacancies.
Special elections and
Yeah.
vacancies. We were gonna put it on this ballot. I think the thinking is we'll push it to next year's ballot. So this year's ballot already has too much crap on it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the plan at this point.
So, okay, me and Austin are WeLink sponsors for that. So
Yes.
Austin and I have agreed to move forward with that after this coming election.
Fax and email voting, we'll discuss as part of this. We're still working on the service area boundaries. That nothing has happened this election.
And so the plan, are we gonna put this on the agenda for introduction this coming Tuesday and vote on it on the 28th? Is that what the current plan is?
If you will allow us to do that.
I don't have a problem with that. I think the most of the changes in here are just dealing with language that needs to be deleted because we no longer have precinct voting, we're going to vote by mail, and we're just clarifying some other procedures.
Yeah, if we introduce it, I'm sure several of our colleagues will give it a close read and come back with suggestions.
Right, and you know, we can schedule a work session on this sometime in the second half of the month.
I believe it's already scheduled. We have an hour work session scheduled already, so.
Okay. When's it being introduced then?
Well, with your permission, we'd like to put it on the addendum, so it would be introduced on the 14th. And then I think the work session is on the 24th.
Okay, but this is not something that needs to go to the people. There's no part of this needs to go on the ballot.
No, none of it needs to go on the ballot, but it does affect some of our operations there.
Oh, so you want this in legal effect by this election?
Well, we would like that. If it doesn't happen, if it's controversial, if it feels uncomfortable passing it because people are running for re-election, we'll postpone it.
I just suspect that given its length and complexity, that even if it's introduced on the 14th, I think there's a good chance it doesn't get passed on the 28th, but perhaps in the first meeting in February.
You know, that would be fine. We could even ask for a public hearing on the first meeting in February if you would,
It's probably a
if you
good
would
idea.
prefer.
We have very busy
Yeah.
agendas on the 14th and 28th already.
Mr. Peterson has gone through the whole thing with us, so
Yeah.
we asked him to sponsor it, but if we could add you as sponsors, we would. And we could request the public hearing on whatever date we want.
Right. Well, we've got this other Public Safety Committee meeting, so we're gonna have to adjourn here. And but we'll come up with a plan and let committee members know what that is. And just keep moving forward with this, and we are officially adjourned.